that he's got himself before we throw it open.
Yes, so we're not on a no bet obviously for Betfair. It's 5-2 Shishkin who heads the market. Styrian Furlong is in there 7-2. Abracadabra is 11-2. 6-1 Fiddler on the Roof, and it's 13-2. Chantry House, I should mention as well, we're 2-1 then by Alan. As I said, it's not on a no bet, but it looks likely that he'll turn up in the Ballymore this day.
And the first boost, Ryan, of the day comes in this race.
Yeah, exactly. So for Shishkin, we're going to push him out to 4-1 from 5-2. As you said, that's up there until 10 p.m. tonight under the horse racing specials tab on Betfair Sportsbook.
We've got the racing up, haven't we?
No, not for this one, sorry.
No, that's alright. But if anyone knows the Timeform ratings, Shishkin's favourite, and is the subject of the price boost, but he's not got the top rating in the race. A lot to do with where he's raced and how he's got here. Would you make him favourite, Martin?
No, I don't think I would, to be honest. I do like him. I think he's crashed in the anti-purse market. He was a hot horse immediately after he won at Newbury. I think he's sort of been on everyone's radar ever since then, and then obviously went to Huntingdon, bolted up and shortened up appreciably subsequently. I would say that at the current prices he's kind of a bit of a false favourite in that he's not achieved as much as Asterion Forlonge and Abracadabra have. So I could see him drifting. I can see why he's been pushed out to 4-1, and that's available for you. At 4-1, I'd say that he's, it's a good price, and you want to be getting on. And that is a big price. You're generally talking about him as a 5-2 shot. Asterion Forlonge probably has got the best single performance, but it was in a very different type of race than the Supreme in my eyes. It was quite a small field, nothing got into it at Leopardstown. It's not a race I've got a strong view in. I'd rather save my talking for the stronger views. If I was going to Abracadabra at sort of 5-6-1 top price, I think he's everything he's done from his bumper days through his hurdling season this year. The only defeat was to Envoy Allen. He is a high class horse. He's a little bit quirky. He hangs left, puts his head on one side. He'll be on the bridle at the second last, and it's just a case of whether he dogs it or not up the hill. But he is a high class horse, and I could see him. He's probably the only horse in the field I could see making into a champion hurdler of the future if he keeps on progressing. But his bumper form and his hurdles form is very good at Abracadabra, and I think he's been overlooked a little bit in the market because he's been beaten, but he was only beaten by Envoy Allen. But like I said, not a race I've got a really strong view of.
Can you fill us in on those two Irish horses then, Bill, from your perspective, Asterion Forlonge and Abracadabra?
Yeah, I think Martin, I'd agree with most of what he says, except I don't particularly fancy Abracadabra for a lot of the reasons that he said already. I think, yes, he's a high-class horse. Yes, he'll probably travel through the race better than almost everything, but I don't see him coming up the hill. I think his very best performance over hurdles this year came when he was second to Envoy Allen. That was around Fairley House. It was a fast 2 miles. It really suited him. But I think Cheltenham will be a completely different kettle of fish, and for me, he's the kind of horse I'd be looking to lay in running, because he'll be bang there turning into the straight. He'll probably be travelling better than anything. I don't think he'll go up the hill. He looked very quirky in bumpers last year. He went out through the rails one day at Leopardstown, and to be honest, he's one that I'd be giving a wide-ish berth to. But I do really like Asterion Forlonge. I do think on what he's achieved, he probably should be favourite. His performance at Leopardstown was a really big one. I know it was a small field, but it was a big performance on the clock. He's come a really long way in a short space of time, this horse. And assuming it looks as if Joe Donnelly will let the two of them take each other on, which I was doubtful about up to now, but I think he should be favoured ahead of Shishkin. It's going to be another step forward for him, but I think he's probably capable of taking it, to be honest.
I think Shishkin's probably the...
It's on, pressed on. I think Shishkin's probably got the most potential, the brightest prospect in the field, but maybe lacks a bit of conditioning. As Dicko's saying, he's without running for in any sort of the level of company that Asterion Forlonge has, for instance, or Abracadabra has. His price is short, and my advice in this would be it's probably a really bad betting, but Ryan at Betfair and Paddy's will be throwing out those 5 places offers, I'm sure. I don't want to commit you to that, Ryan. Don't want to get you sacked or anything.
As far as Paddy Barrow concerned, second, third and fourth money back on day one, so I'm not sure for Betfair at the moment.
Firms that aren't Paddy Power or Betfair will probably saying you can have 4 places, 5 places.
I'm sure on the day Betfair Sports will be 4 places.
Yeah, precisely. I think it becomes a much better betting race then. If I was going to put up a horse at a much bigger price, it would be one who's already got a verdict over a horse who's a shorter price than him, and that's Edward Stone. He's already beaten Fiddler on the Roof. I think it's a bit of a mudlark. Of course, the ground between now and then is a concern. We don't really know which way it would go. It looked like it was going to be dry in between now and then, and the forecast has changed once more. So there's a lack of certainty there, but for me, he's the sort of horse that will be much better in a big field, strongly run race, away from bad ground. Really impressed the day he beat Harry Senior to say he'd done so much wrong. That horse is bound for an Albert Violet or a Ballymore, and he's full of stamina. And when he came off the bridle after the last Edward Stone, I didn't think there was any way he could possibly get past, but he did do. There's a big engine in there, and I think 16s, I think I saw up there. If you could get 16s or 14s on the day with an extra place or an extra place or two, that's a pretty sound way to go, even if you might just be playing for a place.
It's a good point that Dan makes about the price as well, because we were all here this time last year deciding whether Al Dancer was a good price of 5-2, and he went off at 9-2, and because he went off at 9-2 because it's supreme. So just worth keeping in mind that even though we're at this stage, especially the first race on the first day, they'll be desperate for your money, so this will be inflated and artificial prices. Rory, what's your reading of the race?
I think that Shiskin looks like a typical Henderson horse in the Supreme, in that they, like Dan said, they have a lot of potential. But I think he's going to make a better chaser in time. I'm a little bit worried about his experience for a race like this. I think he's been a bit keen, and it's been masked a little bit by him having so much more class than those that he's raced against so far. But I do worry about the occasion a little bit for him, and I think that Asterion Falange's form is at a higher level at this stage. I think to do what he did on just his second start over hurdles at Leopardstown was really impressive. I understand what Martin was saying, that there were very few that got into the race that day, but I think a lot of that was due to the pace that they went, and to sustain it in the manner that he did against horses at that stage, I thought were two of the better Irish novices, to be honest with you. I thought Easy Work and Mount Leinster were two of the more promising novices in Ireland, and he completely dismissed them on just his second hurdle start. He only made his debut over hurdles after the turn of the year, which ordinarily would be quite a big negative for the Supreme, but the fact that he's won a Grade 1 and the preeminent Irish trial for this race, I think 3 times in the last decade, and Mullins trained horses won that race, and Leopardstown have gone on to win the Supreme. I have him in a similar mould, to be honest, and I think he should be the favourite.
Pointless dwelling on a race where basically, bar Rory don't have a particularly strong view, but who's going to make the running in this? And is Asterion Falange the Champagne Fever Otto type rather than the Douban, who they need to make use of? That's a question, Rory. Sorry.
Yeah, I do think he'll stay further, but I also think that he showed so much speed at Leopardstown that they can make the running if they want to, but I don't think they have to. I don't know how many are going to end up running here, but certainly you think the likes of Fiddler on the Roof
And Master Debonair, he's been free, hasn't he?
I think he's missing it. I think he's going to entry, yeah. But if Fiddler on the Roof wants to make the running, I'm sure Asterion Falange can sit second or third. I don't think he's been keen at all. I like him.
So I think that the consensus is that Asterion Falange, we all think, has got a good chance of going off favourite for this, and probably deserves to be ahead of Shishkin at this stage.
We boosted the wrong horse, haven't we?
You might have done.
Yeah, well, obviously Shishkin is now into 5-2 favourite with us, so we've seen plenty of support for him, but I just question what he's beaten as well. He's beaten Chamblou last time, he was rated 139, but I don't think that's favourite as well, in my opinion, and he's the one I'd be on.
So give us an outline for the Arkle, please, Ryan, just the prices and how we stack it up. We're sort of, Notebook's been at the top of this division for some time now, so is his price still contracting, or is
Yeah, well, since the DRF, the Dublin Racing Festival, he's obviously shortened. He's backed that run up from Christmas, so he's now 5-2. Heading our betting. Fakir Dudaree is 9-2. It's 6-1 Cashback. 6-1 Bruno Up a Storm, and it's 12-1 Bardem 4. My opinion on the race is that I think Fakir Dudaree is a little bit overpriced in comparison to Notebook, given the ride that he got at Christmas by Mark Walsh. I think he was more worried about Lorena that day behind him than he was Notebook. Notebook had a lot to prove on that occasion. He obviously is a very good horse in his own right. He's obviously rided much lower over hurdles than what he is now over fences, but I think with a more aggressive ride on Fakir Dudaree, I think he could easily turn the form around with Notebook. We know he stays 2.5 mile. He won the Drinmore when Samcro fell at the second last, but he might have had him beat that day given Samcro's run since that. He's obviously achieved a high level over hurdles. He was fourth in the Supreme, staying on all the way to the line. That race has worked out okay. It's probably not the best Supreme ever ran with Classical Dream, but there's winners in and around him on that occasion. And he obviously won in Cheltenham as well in January last year, so he has good course form. He jumps very well. You could probably say a lot of them in this will jump well.
Supreme is still developing. We don't quite have a handle on each horse, but Notebook is top dog in the division right now, but the worst horse to win the Arkle in recent times was Western Warhorse. Remember that horse with David Pipes? And that ran to 174 on the adjusted ratings in winning the Arkle. So even though Notebook has got those string of ones next to his name and his favourite, and so far at least is the top dog in the division, history tells us that there's usually a better performance than it takes to win the Arkle. So with that in mind, Billy, do you think that Notebook is a really good horse, or is he just the best of a pretty moderate bunch?
I think he's possibly both, to be honest with you. He's a horse that, yeah, he was nothing special over hurdles last year. He won a maiden hurdle, he finished second in a couple of good novices. But he's taken his form to a different level over fences this year. Every time he's run, I've expected him to get beaten. I thought that he was biting off more than he could chew on more than one occasion, but he keeps rising to the occasion. He keeps getting better and better. And to be honest, I think he'll win again on Tuesday. He's one of my banker bets of the meeting. I think everything, he just ticks all the right boxes for me. I think the race will be run to suit him. He's got a really high cruising speed, and there's absolutely buckets of pace in this race. They'll go a right good gallop. He'll be able to sit second or third nice and handy. His jumping, touch wood, to date has been exceptional, which will keep him in the race. And I just love the way he finished off at Leopardstown the last day. Himself and Cashback went at it a long way out. Both of them jumped brilliantly, but I really like the way that Notebook battled after the last, put his head down. He was very strong at the line. I think he'll come up the hill well at Cheltenham. And I know there's plenty, like Ryan's making the case for Fakir Dudaree. I know Martin fancies him as well. Let's not forget that Notebook was giving Fakir Dudaree £7 at Christmas. He won't have to give him £7 on Tuesday. I still think there's room for improvement. We've still got a P on his rating. And I think we might have underestimated him slightly. He's got a Timeform master rating of 155. But if you look at his Leopardstown Christmas form, he actually ran to a time figure of 157, so it's really solid form on the clock. I think we could possibly have rated him a little bit higher on that form, and that would put him almost on a par with Duke de Genève winning performance in the Arkle last year. I don't think it's any better race than it was last year, and I think Notebook will take all the beating.
Rory, what do you think about this Notebook and the others?
I agree with Billy. I think the fact that we think it's quite an open race, the market suggests that there's 6 or 7 in with quite a good chance. It's quite rare for an Arkle, but I do think that what Notebook has done is head and shoulders above the rest at the moment, and I think that there are reasons for believing that he can confirm the form over the Irish horses that he's beaten. I know that when he beat Fakir Dudaree at Christmas, there are potential excuses for Fakir Dudaree in terms of the ride he got, but Notebook was giving him £7 then in Weight for Age, and they're running off levels now, and Fakir Dudaree was not an immature horse. He was a horse who had run 5 times in France before he even came over, including twice over fences as a 3-year-old. And Notebook gave him £7 and beat him. And then he bolted to the start at the Dublin Racing Festival in the wrong direction, must have expended a lot of energy, and still beat Cashback quite readily to my eyes. I think he mastered Cashback after the last, and then he was dossing up the run-in. I think he had more in the tank. And I think as long as he gets to the start in okay order, I think he's definitely the one to beat. I know they're planning on putting earplugs in, I believe. I hope that will help. And in terms of the English, I don't think the English form matches up to the Irish at the moment. Global Citizen won the Wayward Lad at Christmas time, but all his form is on flat tracks. I think he has quite a lot to prove at Cheltenham. And Rouge Vif is another one of the prominent English horses in the market, and he's been beaten a couple of times. I think it's quite hard to believe that he's an Arkle winner. So I think there are definitely grounds for thinking that Notebook has the best form and is going to confirm that, to be honest. I know that often it's high class hurdles form that comes to the fore on the Arkle, and he was definitely not that. I think he's only a mid 130s horse over hurdles, but so many of Henry de Bromhead's horses are far better chasers and hurdlers, and he's the perfect example. I think if you watch his jumping closely, he's not only very good on a stride, but for such a big horse, he's very good when he's on the wrong stride, and I think that's really important for a race like this. There are 12 fences in the Arkle. What are the chances that you're going to meet all of them on the perfect stride? It's quite low, and so you want a horse that is able to adjust itself quite quickly, I think. And if you look at his run when he won the Craddockstown at Punchestown in November, there was a fence, I think 3 or 4 out, where he adjusted himself superbly on the wrong stride. And the same in the Irish Arkle last time, I think it was 4 out, he was on the wrong stride and he lost virtually no ground at all. I think this is a horse that is seriously clever jumper, has a lot of ability. And I know that they've been riding him handily, but I don't think he has to be ridden like that. And with so much pace on in the race, I think they can take back race in touch, and I think he's going to win, to be honest.
He's spoken more than Cleary has up to in 3 years. I'm not Lano. Martin's got more of a view in this. I'll give it a 10 out of 10 here. I backed the horse who's going for the Marshall and he's going for the wrong race. That's Mr. Fisher, because it's just hard to envisage a scenario where they don't go mad in this race. We've put the kettle on. Fakir Duderif, they revert to the tactics that clearly suit him so well. Myra Banbury's done nothing but front run. Global Citizen's another horse that has tended to be at his best when forcing the pace. So I was looking for something at bigger odds that might play its hand late. Mr. Fisher does tie him with Al Dancer, and if you want to take an absolute flyer, I backed him for the Grand Annual thinking that was a perfect race for him, but a stronger run, 2 miles. It really brought the best out of him when he won that Betfair hurdle that they ran at Ascot last season. He absolutely destroyed him that day, looking a proper horse in a proper race. I know we dissed him earlier. Jamie said he was a bad price when we were discussing this for the Supreme, as he turned out to be. But as Rory's mentioned, it's supposed to be a race won by a high-class hurdler, and essentially there isn't one in this. It's fairly substandard, and the main angle for me is the fact that there is a significant quantity of the horses at best when forcing the pace or are likely to force the pace. So I won't put anybody off having a few shekels on horses at much bigger prices that might plod into a place.
I'll just jump in here before Martin has his say, because I've backed Al Dancer as well. Just with the simple fact that the hood will be back on. And so far over fences, he's faced, the number of rivals he's faced is 3, 3, 5 and 3. Just small field tactical races. And as Dan said, he really came alive in that Betfair hurdle when we had a strongly run race. So his jumping isn't great, and that's always likely, but that's built into his price. And I just think that the race floor really sets up nicely for Al Dancer. So I just think that he probably overpriced.
As has been touched on a little bit, I've got a slightly different view on Notebook. I'm not sure about him giving his running at Cheltenham. Last year he ran at the festival. Admittedly, he was a 50-1 shot last year when he went to Cheltenham. But as soon as he hit the downhill point of the track coming down the hill going towards 3 out, he came under pressure and looked pretty uncomfortable. And he's an absolute giant of a horse. He's massive, like really wide, long. And he didn't appear to me to handle the track. Now going into the race, admittedly, like I say, he was a 50-1 shot, but it's literally the only time in his life that he's not actually performed. He's not run up to form. So if you, prior to Cheltenham last year, he kind of earned a stab at a big meeting, if you like, by performing with credit and gradually improving his form. All season this season, he has improved his form. but it's all Punchestown, Leopardstown, flatter tracks. And when I watched him at Cheltenham last year, I just didn't think he liked the track at all. So that bothers me, as does the point referred to about him bolting to post at Leopardstown last time out, just because you don't get away with that sort of thing at the Cheltenham Festival. It's going to be even more competitive. There's going to be even more of an atmosphere there, and if he loses it at all, there's no margin for error at the Cheltenham Festival, and all of that bothers me as to why he might not give his running. Fakir Dudery, on the other hand, is a horse that has produced his form at the Cheltenham Festival. He ran in the Supreme as a juvenile, which not many horses even try, but he performed with loads of credit to finish 4th. He's already won over 2.5 miles. I really like that angle with him, because I think you're gonna. The lads have already mentioned about the likelihood of a very strong gallop. That's pretty much a gimme in the race this year with the amount of front runners that there are in there. And you look back through previous articles, going back to the likes of My Way to Souls and Tidal Bay. The last 2 winners were Duke de Ginevra, Footpad. This year it's going to be run on soft ground. All of those horses had won over 2 mile, 3.5 furlongs or a little bit further prior to winning the Arkle. So being a strong stayer in an Arkle, because of the pace that they tend to go, usually we sit here nearly every year saying they're going to go hard in the Arkle, and they nearly always do. It is that type of race. And I think with the ground as it's going to be this year, there's going to be a proper emphasis on stamina. And Fakir Dudery is a very, very quick jumper, and he's also a strong stayer at 2 miles, as the Dinmore proved in last year's performance in the Supreme as well. As a 4-year-old, he was just ripping it up the hill as a young horse. So I do think that the run of the race will suit him. His jumping will stand him in good stead, and ultimately, in the latter stages, the stamina that he's already proven will stand him in very good stead as well. So I think Fakir Dudery, and just on the weight for age allowance, whatever you think about it, whether it's £2, £3, sort of lenient towards the 4-year-olds one way or the other, it is there for a reason, because these horses are essentially physically maturing. They're growing still, they're strengthening up still. So there is a reason why that weight for age allowance is there, and why it disappears sort of steadily over the course of the 5-year-old season.
We move on to the Champion, where the pitch has been pretty. Well, it hasn't been unclear, has it? We just had horses flitting in and out of consideration. But ever since Christmas, Everton has been favourite, but that again muddied by the fact that she was reportedly coughing last week. Ryan, what's the current state of affairs with the Champion hurdle?
Yeah, so Everton's back into 7-2 now. I think JP got his price with the news coming out. It went out to about 6-1 in the exchange. She's back in now to 7-2 after Nicky Henderson reporting that it won't interrupt her campaign as in going to the Champion hurdle itself. Pendant Hills is there 5-1. Honeysuckle's obviously been confirmed from the mares now. Silas Emery, who still needs to be supplemented, is at 6-1, and Super Sunday's at 10. My view on the race is that I think Epitaph is plenty short at that price. I just feel she's a lot to prove on a track around a track like Cheltenham. All her best runs have been on flat tracks at Newbury and Kempton. And if you look at the finishing speed from the race at Christmas at Kempton, it was 105%. So it looked that it turned into a bit of a speed test, which would have suited her. So I'd be against her at the top of the market. And one I've been backing for quite a while now, and I'm fairly sweet on, is Curse Sublime. He's around a 16-1, 14-1 chance. He had his win done since he ran at Christmas in Leopardstown. He was only beaten 12 lengths on that occasion, and Davy Russell reported that he heard a bit of a noise a couple of hurdles out in that run, and kind of eased on him in the straight. As I said, he was only beaten 12 lengths, so for a horse that got as lightly ridden as he was on that occasion, I thought he would have been beat further than he was. Sharjah obviously disappointed at the Dublin Racing Festival, but Petit Mouchoir ran up to form and wasn't beaten too far by Honeysuckle. They say he's the best workhorse in Gordon Elliott's yard, and they've sorted out his win in the interim. So, given his run, only beating a couple of lengths in the Triumph last year by Pendant Hills, he's 3 times the price he is, and he obviously hasn't even won this season. So, for me, I like Curse Sublime at a price, but I'll be definitely taking on Epitaph on the day.
Have you got a bet there on that?
Yeah, I think there are only 2 horses with any scope in this race, and Ryan's dissed them both. We must point out that Ryan told me earlier that his partner is Lisa O'Neill's sister, so there's an inside line to the Elliott yard if ever there was one. I think she was the person who rode Tiger Road to win the
Yeah, to win the national chase, yeah.
So maybe I'm foolish here, listening to the wind a bit, but the two for me, I think, I'll let Ron eulogise about Epperton, because we've already chatted about this, but Pentland Hills is the horse for me who just still has a real air of untapped potential. He was an absolutely decisive winner of the Triumph, thrived in that sort of scenario. He went there after only one win at Plumpton. Endo did that years ago, apparently in the 80s, way before me, of course, where he went from Plumpton to a Triumph and won it with an outsider. So it's some compliment that perhaps that he'd not just taken the same route, but the fact he had the wherewithal to win a race like that, which we know is very demanding, with such little experience under his belt. He's had 2 runs this season. I'm going to do the old, I was at Cheltenham that day, as if it had some sort of gravitas to it. First one of the day. But he definitely needed the run, and he pulled too hard, and he still managed to get his head in front after the last until he wilted back pretty badly late on. He lost 3 places in the last 25 yards or so. He then went to Haydock with the longest running I've ever seen. I mean, it made Cartmel look like a Newman Abbott or something. And I backed him there. It was the slowest death of all time. He was in front, but the winning post just never materialised. I don't know where the fuck he was. And he got chinned, completely robbed really by Ballyandy, who's a plodder, strong stayer at the trick, who managed to get past him. He too has had his win done. So if we're saying the Course of Leeds is going to be a better horse from last year because he's had his done, no reason why with such a strong travelling horse like Pentland Hills it won't be the same case. Travelled like a proper horse last season when he won the Triumph, and has travelled like a proper horse again in what is clearly a properly paltry renewal. It's a bad race, and I think if there's 2 stars in there, or 2 potential high class or top class animals, it's him and the horse that Martin's going to tell you about now, I think.
I don't think I'm going to tell anybody anything they don't know already about Epperton, to be honest, other than, in my eyes, everybody's looking to get against her because she got beat at Cheltenham last season. If this were at a different track, she'd be close to even money, to be perfectly honest with you. And it is a different track to last year, for what it's worth. It's the old course, not the new course. It's a furlong shorter than she ran over last year. That wasn't even the deal last year, to be honest. She went there very immature. She was having her 3rd hurdle start. It was very rushed preparation. She'd only run a few weeks before at Exeter. And her jumping just didn't hold up last year. It's not been a problem otherwise, and she's proven herself in a well-run handicap and a Christmas hurdle, a Grade 1 already this season. So her jumping's fine. She's improving quickly. She's the one horse in the field which is undoubtedly a bad, weak champion hurdle field beyond her, and she's the one horse in the field that's produced a champion hurdle calibre performance. You'll see that she's top on Timeform ratings. They've got a 155p. I'd say that's an absolute minimum of what she could be rated. Really, she could have easily been given more for the manner that she won the Christmas hurdle, and she absolutely pissed up, to be honest. And you've got to look at horses like Super Sunday, Silver Streak, that she's already whizzed past on the bridle. I just don't see how they're going to live with her if she runs a race, if she produces her form. And literally, in my eyes, I'm just backing her to produce her form. If she doesn't, and she proves that she's completely ineffective at Cheltenham, fair enough, I'll hold my hands up. But at nearly 4-1 on the exchanges at the moment, I definitely think that is a massive price. I think she'll go off closer to 6-4 than she will 3-1. And I honestly do, because it's just a weak race. It's a weak race. You're going to have horses like Cornerstone, Lad, Petit, Mouchoir setting the gallop for her. She's keen. The only time she wore a hood as well was in last year's last year's festival, and I wouldn't be surprised a little bit if that put her off a little bit and stopped her from concentrating and maybe missing the odd hurdle out. To be honest, the fact that she had the hood on, it's not for every horse. She's improving. She's got the best form. I honestly think she'll win if she gives her a running. I can't see a better, quicker, more talented horse in that field, and she's still progressing as well. I think everybody is genuinely looking to get against her, and that's why, because of last year's festival, and that's why she's the price she is. I think she's a massive price.
Billy, what's your view on Epperton? And would Chilhouse Emery have any chance if he was parachuted into this race?
I don't share Ron's enthusiasm for Epperton, to be honest.
Nobody does.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with Ryan. I think she's a flat track horse. I might be proven wrong, but I think she's all about speed. I'm not a big fan of Pentland Hills for fairly similar reasons. I didn't think the Triumph last year was a particularly strong race for what it's worth. I think Course Sublime will win next year's Artel. I was kind of hoping to run him in it this year, but that's a different story. Of the Irish Challenge, I think Silas Emery is very interesting. His hurdles form isn't quite good enough to win a champion hurdle. His chase form might be, but whether he's quite as good over hurdles as fences, it remains to be seen. If he ran in this race if you put his Timeform chase mark on him, he'd be coming out about 3 or 4 pounds clear top rated in this. His hurdles form isn't quite up to that mark, but if the ground is soft, they'll go a good gallop. He'll be staying on well. I certainly see why they're running him in the race. I think he's got a really decent each way chance. But they say the definition of madness is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. Well, I'm going to be a little bit mad and I'm going to do exactly what I did last year, and that's back Sharjah each way. Obviously things didn't work out from last year, but I think this year's race will be absolutely run to suit him. I think he's a horse that he's always under. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. Basically, he won a Galway hurdle off a mark of 145. Epatante won a handicap at the start of this year off 131, so that'll tell you there's a huge difference there. Sharjah has won 3 Grade 1s over hurdles. He ran badly at Leopardstown the last day, but if you put a line through that run, he'd be half the price that he is now. I think he's a huge price. I think if he bounces back to form, he beat Petit Mouchoir a lot more comfortably than Honeysuckle did in the Irish Champion Hurdle. If he's back at that sort of form, Patrick will ride him. He'll ride him kind of cold. He'll ride him to be coming up the hill. I think he'll do that. I think he's a big each way shout. But other than that, it's a race I don't have massively strong views on.
I saw his stuff when he said Patrick will ride him. Why, if he was still a viable champion hurdler, would there be all this faff about Silas Emery being supplemented just because Mullins wants as many chances as he can get?
I think different owners. And Willie has an embarrassment of riches in the 2-mile chase division. That's the other race that Silas Emery had run, and he'd run in the champion chase. He has a much better chance of winning a champion hurdle than winning a champion chase. So that's why he'd run here. Similarly, I thought Honeysuckle had a better chance of winning a champion hurdle than winning a mare's hurdle. That sounds a bit mad, but I was sad to see today that she's been rerouted to the mare's hurdle because I thought this race would suit her, but that's a moot point now.
In the spirit of Billy saying that the definition of madness is doing the same thing year on year and expecting something different, I'd like to welcome everyone back who was here in the last few years. Some rampant racism involved in this champion hurdle, some Brexit shit going on because the Irish lads are saying Epatante can't have her and go with the Irish team. Rory, yes or no Brexit and yes or no Epatante?
I'm actually indifferent to both. I don't have an opinion on Epatante, to be honest. In terms of this race, I echo Ryan's thoughts. I think Curse of Doom is vaguely interesting. I think what he says about the Triumph last year definitely rings true, but there were 2 horses, turning for home in the Triumph last year, there were 2 horses on the bridle. One was Pentland Hills and one was Curse Sublime. And yes, Pentland Hills went on to win by 3 lengths, I think, but Curse Sublime is now more than 3 times the price of Pentland Hills, who hasn't really advanced his claims this year, I don't think. So I think he's vaguely interesting, but the other horse I think is hugely overpriced. We've had terrible ground all winter, but Cheltenham drains better than any course in the country. I think Lynchy's second guessed me already. I wouldn't be surprised if the ground is good to soft at worst come Tuesday. And in that case, Badana Blue is a mad price as things stand. 33 to 1 I think she is. On official figures, she's the best horse in the race, given the sex allowance. She's not far behind on our figures. She bolted up in the Scottish Champion Hurdle last year from a mark of 154. She had a £7 claimer on that day, but she absolutely bolted up. The ground was too soft in the Champion Hurdle last year. If it is drier this year, I'd give her a big chance each way at 33 to 1. She has got good Cheltenham form. She was an unlucky 4th in the Greatwood earlier last season from a big mark. and she shaped pretty well in the Mayor's Novice Hurdle, I think 3 seasons ago, behind Let's Dance. I think she's interesting at a big price. In what it's become so fashionable to slam this champion hurdle for quality that it doesn't need to be said that it's not going to take a typical performance to win it, in all likelihood. I think if she runs to her form, she's going to be on the premises, and she's a big price.
What does it say about her standing even in the stable when Epatante they can't get enough on? She's going off 2-1 for that Christmas hurdle for down the blue. They couldn't give her away at all. Is that just that was Epatante's cup final, or is there a strong element that they know Epatante's a better horse than Verdana, and Verdana for whatever reason isn't right?
Yeah, quite possibly, but I think it was soft against him, wasn't it? It was a good soft. But either way, I thought Verdana Blue shaped pretty promisingly that day, and you're getting an even bigger disparity in prices here. And I don't know how much I put stock in the argument about Epatante at Cheltenham, but the fact remains that the only time she's been there, she finished 9th. Well, I prefer the 3-1 shot, then. You don't have to shout me down.
No, I was just asking the question. I'm doing Lynch's role there, sorry.
You've just started
at what price is she not a bet? Epatante? Ross?
What price is she not a bet?
Yeah, because it's one of those.
I'd say that under 2-1 would be the right price, and I think she'll go off that price. I honestly do. I think people, and I was doing it myself, which is why I'm almost kind of gone the other way. I was looking myself for what can beat her, and I honestly don't think anything can beat her if she gives a running. Now I accept that there is an element of will she definitively handle the track, and she might not. But there are other factors at play that make me think that there are other reasons other than... I don't think she even didn't handle the track last year, to be honest with you. She didn't lose any positions on the running. She missed the second last out quite badly. She was very awkward. And then Geraghty just looked after her and just didn't knock her about at all. And she actually looked to me under hands and heels riding on the running. If you watch last year's Dawn Run, she finished with a bit of running left. She just didn't have a hard race, having made a couple of significant mistakes at a very early stage of her career. But she's proven she's a different horse this year. She's jumped well in strongly run races. To be honest, I honestly couldn't be stronger on the fact that if she gives a running, she wins. Because it is a weak race. Everybody knows it's a weak race, and the pretty slow horses running against her, like I say, Super Sunday, Cornerstone Lad, they should go quick. And I think she'll win if she jumps a clear round and gives her a running.
Anything? What? So have we got anything else on the Tuesday or not? Main graphics. No. So a bit of a free. What does the mares look like now? Because are we going to get Benny Didier versus Honeysuckle or not? What do you think, Ryan?
Well, after today they've confirmed Honeysuckle's going to the mares. Obviously our price was an honour no bet price. On the exchange she's short from 4.3 into around 3.1 now, Honeysuckle. Benny Didier is around 197, whereas she's 8 to 11 on the sports book. As Billy said, she might have had a better chance in the champion hurdle. I can't see how Honeysuckle beats Benny Didier in this race, to be honest. And what Benny Didier done in Auteuil in France last season, beating the Boncoeur. The Boncoeur was only beaten once when she stood up in France. I think a lot of people aren't really reading into that run as what it was. I thought it was a serious performance. She obviously bolted in a Gower. And when you look at Honeysuckle's form, true and true, it doesn't stand up as much as maybe you would think. She beat Darver Star a half a length the last day and Petit Mouchoir back in third. That's not good enough form to beat Benny Didier. Obviously she's probably better over 2.5 miles, but even going back to her Hampton's Grace run, when she beat Apple Shade, who was below par, Bacardi's, who's very beatable, I'd imagine they'd have Benny Didier way ahead of Bacardi's and William Munson's yard. So I think the prices are right, but I did around 197 on the exchange. I can see Benny Didier going off a lot shorter and Honeysuckle drifting on the day myself.
Is that factoring in? Is that factoring in any existing doubt that she might still go to the stayers, or is that pretty much ruled out now?
Well, she's been hovering around. She was out to 2.18 today. She's back into 197. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head what price she is for the stairs on the exchange, but I'd imagine she will turn up in the mares, and I'd say if she is properly confirmed for it, she'll probably only go into about 4 to 5 maybe on the exchange, given Honeysuckle's a definite runner now.
I'm with Ryan on Honeysuckle. I don't really rate her that much. I don't think that bare form last time amounts to a great deal. Petit Mouchoir, we know all about him, was put in his place in the novice chase division and reverted to hurdling and struggles to win races. He is what he is, and he was coming back at her. For me, she just doesn't have the bare form. Like, you look at a lot of these Irish staying 2.5 mile plus hurdlers, and I don't think there's any substance to them. Penhill looks a shadow of his former self. He's been running these races. Bacardi's is the same. Kilulta Vic, they're all drifting like barges beforehand and just not running well. I think they've deteriorated massively. I've had a complete speculator in this race on a horse who, if it was a flat race, might have a 0 offer price, but it's Build Me a Buttercup, and I'll start with the negative. She can't jump and she doesn't find anything off the bridle. But she's got an awful lot of ability. She's gone off Fav for, I think she was a Fav for a Says. She's been thereabouts in a Royal Ascot handicap, I think it was the Ascot Stakes. Yeah, of course she's got to jump 10 things, but in terms of ability, I just get the sense that she's a sort of mare that whatever the company will get to the last, travelling really well, and she was 40 to 1, and I think that's a bit disrespectful. The horse doesn't care, but 40 to 1 about an animal that if it was a flat race would definitely not be anything like that sort of price. We know it's got loads of ability. Will probably travel better than All Bar Benedigier, and it was 40s, and I don't know if we've got just 2 places to play with. We may only have 1, but I'm not a massive fan of Honeysuckle at all. Thought 40 was a bit insulting really, and I've heard that she's really offended by the price that she was made. Yeah, she's a proper non-runner over horse, because she probably will go for a handicap, but I'd much prefer it in a mare's hurdle where you've got loads of no-hopers, rather than a handicap where there'll be a flat-out pace, and that will put pressure on the fact she doesn't jump well and she's really a weak finisher. So I think that's probably the best bet of the week, actually.
Do you think the Benedigier is a better horse than Honeysuckle, Bill?
Well, I'm assuming that Willie Mullins is watching the live stream of this on Facebook, and if he is, Willie, will you please run Benny the Jim the stairs hurdle, because I've backed her without Paisley Park, non-runner, no bet, and she's money against, so I think I'd be picking up money if she runs in it. I think for what it's worth, I think she'll win whatever race she runs in the festival. I think she'd beat Paisley Park in the stairs, but I think I thought she was a certainty in the race last year. She would have won it. I think she'll win again this year. I certainly wouldn't dismiss Honeysuckle. She's still unbeaten. She's one of these mares. She does what she has to do, and she'll give a very good account again next week. But I just don't think she has the same class as Benedigier. I think she's a different level altogether. The 2 of them are miles clear of the rest of them. But I could see Stormy Ireland running well. I think she's a better mare than last year. She finished 2nd to Roxana last year. She's improved a good bit. She'll be a big price. She's much more tractable than she used to be. She was a bit of a tearaway. They can ride her kind of like a proper racehorse now. She's without the top 2, she'd probably win it. She's the best of the rest, but I think it's Benedictier's race. Really, she'll pick it up if she runs, but I hope she doesn't.
Before we chat about the handicaps on the Tuesday, I just want to ask your opinion moreover about this National Hunt Chase, because on paper we've got a Willie Mullins short price favourite who's 3 from 3 over fences and carefully selected, but I watched forensically each of his 3 wins, and he jumped 44 fences.
What was watching forensic? What was the forensic part?
The forensic part, I had a lab coat on and a jeweler's eyepiece. He jumped 44 fences. He jumped, let me count again, 26 of them adequately. He jumped 16 of them sketchily, and he jumped 2 of them horrifically. And even though it's changed dynamics, there's still 23 fences to be jumped in this. So on paper you look at him and think, well, he's a certainty. Mullins 1-1-1 and Champagne Classic is out, but I'm desperate to get against this horse. Is there anything I can get with?
Oh, I'm so with you on this. He's just got the horse doesn't seem to have any agility. It's just a huge brute of a horse that he made a mistake last time that you wouldn't recover from at Cheltenham, I don't think, in a proper race. Ronald Pumpman in the race, he looked like he was being ridden with an iron another day sort of thing. Never really put in it by power, and then he was left clear at the second last. Well, it wasn't still. I don't think he was up in the air. He'd have won anyway. But he's got. How many did he jump in that race? 23. So he's got a clear 23 fences. Will make at least one mistake. I mean, he's a bit like the Beakstown, that massive horse of Skelton's that cannot put itself right. Rory spoke earlier about how good Notebook is at writing itself. This horse looks quite the opposite. The age spoke for far too long about that. So I don't know. I sound like an idiot here, but I think you want to be looking again. Massive prices on horses that will definitely stay. A thorough test of stamina, because this could turn out to be a very, very bad renewal, more in the mould that we used to see of this race rather than the mould that we were threatening to see with, say, Copperhead in the race, or we've seen when Native River beat Manila Rocco, for instance. The two, I might as well put my cards on the table. Ocean Cove's one, he was 50s, completely slow this horse, but he ran into second behind Springfield Fox. He's never had a try over 3 3/4 miles plus. It'll definitely suit him. He does nothing but stay. Sort of see a case for New Tide as well for Kim Bailey. But the other one that I backed is an animal who might instead go for the Midlands National, because that type of horse. That's Christmas in April. He's running 2 of these provincial nationals and won both of them. Beat Perfect Candidate. We know where we stand with that horse. He's nearly old enough to smoke, but he's a proper solid 135 horse. He gave him a comfortable beating. He's not slow despite the fact he stayed on this horse, and for me he was overpriced at 25s, but I think the thread that's running through my opinion on this race is really wanting to be against the Mullins horse that I don't think will jump well enough.
Just on Ocean Cove, Dan, I think Lisa O'Neill has confirmed today to ride him. I think Fowler Bryant's booked her, so he was one that I had down as well as massive price. He's around 51. So.
Well, Rory put me off saying I'd be the lesser rider because we weren't dead sure I won't mention any names, but that's things to my ears.
Are you in agreement, Bill, with
a big price
with this carefully selected?
No, not necessarily. I think he's probably too short now, and especially with Copperhead after coming out. He's going to go off a very short price favourite. I think he's by far and away the best horse in the race. And I think actually the 3 miles and 6, they'll be going no gallop, they'll hack around. I don't think his jumping will be an issue at all. He's only been beaten once over jumps, and that was in a Grade 1 novice hurdle at the Punchestown Festival last year. He finished third to Manila Indo and Allaho. If either of those horses were in this race, what price would they be? I mean, I think his jumping is perfectly adequate over fences. Yeah, he made the odd mistake. I think the Nace Run the last day was a bit of an afterthought because they had to get him qualified. I think in another year he'd have come straight from Punchestown, where I thought he jumped perfectly adequately, to be honest. I think he's the best horse in the race, but he's a ridiculous price for a race of, for 3 miles and 6 and 23 fences or whatever. Of the other Irish ones in the race, I think one with a big chance at a big price is Henry de Bromhead's Plan of Attack. He's a horse that, I think he's had 4 runs over fences, he's won 2 of them. He was third in the Paddy Power, really competitive handicap chase. He ran off 135, I think it was. He was only beaten on the run-in. I think they'll probably ride him a little bit differently. They'll hold on to him much longer over this trip. I think he should stay. He gets 3 miles and 1. I think he should stay this trip. And interestingly, he's been ridden on a number of occasions by Barry O'Neill, who's one of the best amateur riders in Ireland. He's one of the top point-to-point jockeys. I assume he'll ride him again. And if he does, I think he'll be a really decent each-way shout. As the lads are saying, it's not the strongest race in the world.
I think Billy makes a really good case, but he's gone 2 days too early, because I think Plan of Attack is a really interesting horse for the Kim Muir. I think that might be the race that they're running in. And I think I'd echo the rest of the panel's thoughts that carefully selected is very, very poorly priced. I agree with Lynchy that this horse is a dodgy jumper. I think the horse needs its mind made up for it over a fence, and that is exactly what it's not going to get here under Patrick Mullins. He likes to drop horses out in the National Hunt Chase, and I can see this making mistake after mistake, if I'm honest with you. I think if they have a late change of heart and they run Copperhead here, I think he'd be the bet of the week, to be honest. And I think he's 4 or 5 to 1 with a run. I think there's absolutely no reason why you should not be backing that horse with a run. It seems like they want to go for the RSA, which is understandable in one sense, but I think he'd win this. And I'm very keen to be against Carefully Selected. I just haven't decided with what yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. If Copperhead was to run, he'd win. And I agree about Carefully Selected. You can't really be backing him because he could easily plough his way through the second fences and be on the back foot from that point. It isn't going to be a good race. If he jumps a clear round, he probably will win. But it's got to be a massive if. I'd be with Dan in terms of playing the race at bigger prices. Springfield Fox, the horse that you mentioned, beat Ocean Curve. He absolutely pulverised that horse, to be fair, at every point of the race at Exeter. He's going to run. He's a safe jumper. He's won both his starts over fences. He's won all 3 starts in point-to-points. He's a pretty safe conveyance. I'm sure he'll run very well. Springfield Fox, there has been a bit of money for him. The other horse at a very big price, I think Ardlethan is just a staying chaser. He's jumping his sound and he just keeps plugging away. He's sort of a Midlands national horse for the future, probably. He might not be quite good enough to actually win the race, but we've been saying it could be a race that falls apart completely if the ground goes soft and it becomes an out-and-out slog of a race. Then Ardlethan is a horse that I could see running well at a very big price. I think he can get as big as 66 to 1 about him generally.
Let's just have a bit of a free-for-all about the 2 handicaps on that day. We've got the Ultima and the Northern Trust, which was the Close Brothers. Has Ryan or anyone got any fancies or views or thoughts on this?
One that stands out in the Northern Trust race you mentioned there, Jamie, is Galvin for me. I know the Irish are always complaining about the marks they get when they come over, but he seems to be on a fairly decent one to me. It looked to me like a race like this was on the agenda from early on in the season. He's been beaten in a couple of beginner shapes, but the form of the races he was beaten in has worked out really well. He was second to Salstrad the last day, who followed up in a mare's chase since, and there's plenty of winners around him from when he was beaten in Fairyhouse too. He just looks the type of horse to me. He's only a 6-year-old that will improve as time goes on, and I think he's probably been laid out for the Northern Trust. I think he's around a 6 or 7 to 1 chance with ourselves at the moment.
Which one, 6 or 7?
I'll tell you now. We have a working laptop.
It's 8 to 13, it's 6.
He's 7 to 1 with us at the moment.
Anyone else for the... You fancy hold that note, or you hold the note?
Yeah, I do. I like to in that race. He's one of them. He powered through that Warwick race over 3 miles. That really wasn't for him. He's not bred to be an out-and-out stay. He represents the same connections who won the race with Mr. Whittaker 2 years ago. Looked a sound jumper. It was a big improvement on what he'd done in his 2 previous runs over fences, but the way he went through the race suggests he was full value for it. He ran into 2 for gold, an out-and-out dogged stayer of Kim Bailey's, a classic Bailey horse really. And he went like a much better horse than him, and Lynch and I were chatting about this in the week, and he made a very salient point to him, Nick, was that if that race had been over 2.5 miles, he'd have probably run to 150, having won the race by 5 or 6 lengths. Got into the race on the bridle and couldn't quite get past a very dogged and determined rival, but this is his trip. He looks like he'll jump well enough for a bigger field. It's obvious that these horses have been laid out, so many of them have, so it's not a boast to say he has, but no doubt at all, having won it 2 years ago, they've had this race in mind from the very start of the campaign. And the other one I like is a horse who was withdrawn from Ascot for having a panic attack. With such a compelling case I make for these horses. A horse called Espoir de Guy, because he's had 3 runs over fences, and the improvement from run to run has been vast. First time at Chepstow, he made ground from impossible position to take second after the last. Finished so strongly. Went to Exeter, got the job done and was never in any danger in the straight, and then went to Ascot in a stronger race again and had that shot to pieces from a long way out. Of course, you've got to take on board the fact that he had this mental wobble on the way, and they withdrew, and he's not been seen since. But I get the sense that without that, you'd be talking about a horse that's half the price. He's one of Venetia's who's improving rapidly. She's done well in this race again. She won the Timeform race that we sponsored in January at Cheltenham. I think it was Something Wells ended up chinning this horse, but she won it with Ping Pong Savola and had a 1-2 in this plate race, in this novice handicap as the Juice or whatever it was at the time. So likewise, I think that she, shrewd as she is, she would have had this race in mind as well. So I thought they were significantly more interested. And also in Galvin, for me, he just doesn't have any depth to his form, and he's 6 to 1. I wouldn't be interested in him at all.
Yeah, I tend to just play the handicaps on the day. I almost certainly will back the conditional on the ultimate to some extent. I might back a couple of others as well at bigger prices, but I do think the conditional, you'll probably know him well from finishing second in the Ladbroke and winning at Cheltenham earlier on in the season. Didn't stay in the classic chase but shaped well. He's a progressive horse for David Bridgewater, who's having a very good season. I suspect he'll go off favourite, to be honest. Vindication at the moment is favourite for the race, but he wouldn't be sure to be effective at the track. I think the conditional will have a very good chance, but the handicaps generally you do get as bigger prices, if not bigger, on the day of the race when you've got the full makeup of the field, so I don't really tend to play them at this stage.
Yeah, I'll mention another one in the Ultima. Seeing as we can say what we like on these preview evenings, I don't think this horse has been off a yard all season, and it's a horse called Cobra de Mai, trained by Dan Skelton. He went to Cheltenham in April last year and bolted up off a mark of 142. Got raised £10, and I think they've basically been trying to shed those £10 all season, and have done so successfully. He's back down to 142. He's been ridden by Bridget Andrews for his first 3 starts of the season, and by the yard £7 claimer for the last 2 runs, in which he's not had his usual headgear and tongue tie on. I suspect that they'll be back on, as will Harry Skelton, and I think he's shown enough, whilst not being off, to suggest that he retains all his ability, and given that he's back down to that mark, I think he's pretty interesting at 16 or 20 to 1.
Right, let's move on to the Wednesday, and we start off with a big one for many people, Endroit Arlen in the Ballymore. Now, Sam Crow and Forheen won this race at short prices in recent times. 8 to 11 Sam Crow, 6 to 4 Forheen. But just looking, since 2000, there have been 7 horses beaten at 2 to 1 or shorter in this race. It is a race that tends to have a high-profile horse coming into it. 2 winners and 7 defeated since 2000. So, what price do you think he's going to go off, Ryan, would you suspect?
Just given there's more strength to the opposition than there was maybe a month or 2 months ago, I think you might be able to get 7 to 4, 2 to 1 on the day. He's 260 on the machine now in the exchange. We're 5 to 4 on an old bet. I think if he got out to 7 to 4, 2 to 1, he's probably one of the bets of the week. His form stacks up everywhere you look. His form is rock solid. Anything he's beat has probably won a race since. The opposition that are up against him in Sport and John, I thought watching that run at Ascot back when he beat Master Debonair, he made every hurdle on a decent stride. I don't think we mentioned earlier about a horse that won't happen to Cheltenham. I don't think it'll happen to Sport and John. I think he still has to prove that he can jump at pace, getting in tight to hurdles. He's second favourite. The big getaway of Willie Mullins, I think it's a year too soon for him. He won an ace maiden hurdle by a street the last day, but if you look at him, I think he's one of the biggest horses in Willie Mullins' yard. And from what he's done and what Envoy Allen done, it's poles apart at this stage. And the big breakaway then of Colin Tizard, I'm not sure his form is up to too much either, and he's only had 2 starts over hurdles. So I think everywhere you look, I think you'll end up getting 7 to 4, 2 to 1 today on the exchanges. And I can't see how Envoy Allen is going to get beat really. He obviously won the champion bumper. That's worked out really well from last year, and as I said, his form is rock solid.
Yeah, a common theme I think through the night will be going back to last year's champion bumper as well. I mentioned Abacadabra earlier, who obviously has a bit of a chance in the Supreme Novices. We've got Time Hill, who will be going in the Albert Bartlett most likely later on in the week. And it was a strong renewal of the champion bumper, and the way that the form has already worked out with the hurdlers that have come out and won races and done extremely well already this season, that proves it. He was an impressive winner of the race. I see absolutely no reason to get against him. Nothing really more needs to be said. His case is obvious. He's unbeaten. He's a very, very good horse. How many others in that race have top class potential? I would say next to none. And he should really win, to be honest. I don't see any reason to get against him.
Lynch, it takes me back to the age when I was first getting into it, when you had most years. When you had most years, I remember a horse called His Song in a Supreme that was, in inverted commas, the Irish banker horse that couldn't get beaten. Nick Dundee in an RSA who tipped up, but better examples who won races like French Holly and Barton, horses like that. Nobody could foresee defeat for these horses. And in this race or the Supreme, and he just, there isn't a hole in this horse. He ran against a horse in Abracadabra who'd be an out and out speed horse. He's run against him twice. For a big horse, he jumps extremely nimbly, and Abracadabra's had a chance to quicken past him if he can, and Environ's just seen him off and never looked like not seeing him off. As Martin says, the key thing is just the incredible strength to that champion bumper of last season, which has worked out better than any renewal in recent memory for sure, and that is a huge thread running through the evening. It's potentially going to throw up the second favourite for the Supreme and Abracadabras, and it will throw up the Fav in Time Hill for the Albert Bartlett, and it will throw up an extremely worthy Fav. I wouldn't be surprised if he was pushing odds on coming off sort of thing. I think he's that good environment.
Yeah, I think that workmanlike is a dirty word in horse racing. Us wankers who were on the telly use workmanlike when a horse is 4 to 11 and wins by a neck, and we say that was workmanlike. But workmanlike actually means just really good at your job, businesslike, and that's what Envoy Allen is. He's never like produced a wow moment, and he's never that flashy. The average winning distance encompassing all 7 of his wins is only 3 lengths. But he just gets the job done, this horse. He's so clinical, so perfect. Do you think he's a real deal as well, though?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're only scratching the surface. I mean, he's done everything that's been asked of him. He keeps producing. I think if he ran in the champion hurdle, he'd probably be favourite. I'm glad he isn't. I think this is the right race to run him in. But he just, you go through his form and you just can't pick any holes in it. He's done everything. I think the trip is ideal for him, and he looks absolutely rock solid.
Would you back for the champion hurdle or not?
That's a good question. It won't happen now, but
What price is Lynch bet?
You have to wait. Are you the same, Rory?
Just so that it's not all one-way traffic on this panel, if we say that we're only scratching the surface with Envoy Allen, then I think the same definitely has to be true of Sporting John. Barry Geraghty looked like he wasn't too fussed about winning on debut. He gave him a squeeze and he shot to the front. And I think it was similar at Ascot last time. That as soon as he gave the horse a squeeze, that he picked up really well. I think there's a lot that we don't know about this horse at the moment, and although Envoy Allen is pretty frightening at the front of the betting, I don't think this is a one-horse race.
we do.
RSA, Ryan. It's an interesting one, this RSA, isn't it? Often, this is another race where you often get a short price favourite, but less so this time. And this is probably the biggest price Champ's ever been all season, given how others have been supported. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so we're standout price at 130 on the Betfred Sportsbook at the moment. He's only slightly bigger on the exchange, so he's one that we'd definitely look to take on next week. Reasons being is that last season he travelled best into the Ballymore before, not really getting up the hill as well as he should have, in our opinion. City Island obviously beat him, it was disappointing this season. He's coming off the back of a fall, so any horse is coming off the back of a fall in a novice chase, going to the festival's favour, I think any bookmaker in the right mind will look to take on. And again, I still think he's to prove himself over this trip. He obviously won at Aintree over 3 miles, but that was a flat 3 miles. This, to me, I think he's more of a 2.5 mile horse. Even the pace he showed when Barry Geraghty nipped up the rail, having looked like he might have was going to run out, suggests to me that 2.5 mile is his trip. As well as the run in the Ballymore last year, I think he should be running in the Marsh myself. And I think Manila Indo is a really solid bet in the race, given he's beaten Allaho a couple of times. 2-1 the score between them. The form of his beginner's chase win in Navan worked out well. Captain CJ the second has come out with a graded chase, and If You Catch Me Now was 8th on that occasion. Won a Grand National Trial at Punchestown since too. So we all know he's a grade 1 horse because he won the Albert Bartlett last year. He's only had 2 runs over fences, but at least he hasn't fallen like Champ has. So I think Manila Indo will probably go off favourite on the day, but Champ is definitely one we'll be looking to take on next week.
And just sorry, while you're here, the boost for Wednesday. Have you got that, Ryan? Sorry.
Yeah, so Altio, I want to boost Altio on the champion chase from 15 to 8 out to 11 to 4. So that's Wednesday's boost. The same applies to that one. It's until 10 o'clock tonight.
I think Allaho is a bit of an exception from that staying novice crop last season because he was so physically so obviously a better chaser. I think he should be marsh bound rather than RSA bound. And I completely share Ryan's opinion. I don't think Champ is a thorough stayer. He's never won a race through stamina. He's won a race because he's got a superior turn of foot. He did get run out of it last season in a Ballymore by City Island. Anybody who follows me on Twitter will know I'm firmly in one camp here and one camp only, and that's with Copperhead, who I think since he was given a quiet one first time out when he probably wasn't fit, the way he came, it doesn't sound like much, but the way he coped with those Wincanton fences for an inexperienced horse, a really demanding jumping track, big field, did not miss a beat, genuinely hasn't made a semblance of a mistake in 3 starts since. The second of those was in the Mandarin, which he won pretty much on the bridle at Newbury. And then, for me, he's got the standout piece of form. Whatever you want to say about it, the race fell apart slightly. He went from 3 horses, 2 of them are stayers, at the end of the back straight looking like they had a chance, and Copperhead made them look pedestrian. He just went right away. He wasn't even hard ridden to go away. He's a freak of a horse. He's by a mare by Josser Algahood. He's out of a mare by Josser Algahood, who was a 7 furlong miler on the flat, as I recall, Jamie, for Shannon and Godolphin. Jabir Abdullah, who this horse should not be staying as well as he does, but for me, he just looks a bit of a freak. I think he's probably surprised the stable, which is why they were labouring over this idea of going for the National Hunt Chase. But you've won a Premier Trial and a Grade 2 novice in its own right. You need to be going for the RSA with a horse that's won it like that, and I think his engine's massive, and I think he should be favourite to win this race. I'd be absolutely made up if Champ enters the straight, one of those where Champ looks like he's tanking and it's a matter of how far. I want to see him try and get past Copperhead, because I don't think it'll happen.
Rory, you said the Copperhead would be your bet of the week if he went for the National Hunt Chase. Would you back him for the RSA as well?
No. I think this is a sign of the depth of the RSA this year. That, having said exactly that, I don't think I'm going to back Copperhead for this at the current prices. I think this is a situation very similar to the one we have this year from last year's RSA, in that we have Santini and Delta work very close to the top of the market for the Gold Cup, and I'm sure that top of the game would be right there himself if he had stayed sound. I think this could be a similar situation in 12 months' time. The likes of Champ, Alaho, Manila Indo could all be very prominent in the Gold Cup market next year. I think this is potentially a really, really good race. On the face of it, it's a slight negative for Alaho and Manila Indo that they've only had 2 runs over fences. Historically, that's been a bit of a negative for the RSA, but I don't think either of them. I wasn't sure about Manila Indo's jumping first time, but I think he was much better second time, and I think Alaho is a very sound jumper himself, so I'm finding it hard to choose between them. If I was forced to one, it would be Alaho, but I think these are basically 4 very similar horses, and this is completely different for Copperhead as to what he would face in the National Hunt Chase.
Ryan said that Milano, he can see going a favourite. He hasn't been great in those 2 chases so far. Do you agree, though, that he could make a big jump? Because we are sort of joining ducks with him so far.
Yeah, I totally agree with Rory. I think the fact that he's only had 2 runs over fences is a slight negative. It wasn't the plan, and he got pulled out of a race at Leopardstown during the year. I think that they certainly intended on giving him more than 2 runs over fences. That's just the way it worked out. To be honest, I was a little disappointed with him today. He won at Navan. I thought he should have won a bit easier, but that form has actually worked out a lot better than it looked at the time. Captain CJ, as Ryan mentioned, he won a Grade 2 3-mile novice chase since, so it's probably a very solid bit of form, and I did think that he won with a lot more in hand than the bare margin would suggest. I thought he jumped really well. I thought he jumped fine the first day, to be honest, at Gordon in really bad ground. I thought he jumped really well at Navan, which is a proper test of a horse, and we know he stays really well. What he's done over fences, he's probably a little bit short, but in the market, but we know how good he was over hurdles, so I think he's certainly the best of the Irish. I'm head of the Alaho fan club, but I really hope he runs in the other race. I really hope he runs in the 2 mile 5 race. I think it'll suit him better. Apart from that, I don't think actually this RSA is building up to be a brilliant race. I'd have a lot of time for Copperhead, as Dan said, not so much for Champ. Certainly after his X-rated fall the last day, I'd be putting a line through him. So I think if there's going to be an Irish winner in this, I think it'll be Menelindo.
Yeah, and my only real view in the race would be that Allaho won't stay. Other than that, I don't have a strong opinion on Ninella Indo, Champ, Copperhead. Aside from Allaho, I don't think he'll get home. He's very keen and he does jump well. I think it's going to be too much of a test of stamina for him at this stage. He didn't get home in last year's Albert Bartlett. This will be a similar stamina test. You know, he finished pretty tired in the Albert Bartlett last year, so I don't think he'll get home.
Right, let's move on to the champion chase. Let's take a temperature in the room because we've got three really defined horses at the top of the betting here. Top of the ratings, top of the division. If you think Chacun Pour Soi is going to win the champion chase, say Chacun after 3. 1, 2, 3.
Chacun!
If you think Defi de Soy is going to win the champion chase, after 3 say Defi. 1, 2, 3.
Defi!
And if you think Altior is going to win the champion chase, after 3 say Altior. 1, 2, 3.
Altior!
I think we have the bet right anyway.
And that's the boost, don't forget. £50 you can have on Altior until 10 o'clock.
Yeah, 10 o'clock tonight.
What
Yeah.
price, Ryan, again?
Out to 11 to 4, 15 to 8. Yeah, so Altior is obviously our favourite in the betting at 15 to 8. Defi de Soy is in there at 9 to 4, and it's 5 to 2. Chacun Pour Soi. Probably not worth mentioning anything else in the race. My take on the race is that I think Defi de Soy will take all the beating. Just for exchange punters that are here tonight, Altior has hit a bigger price than his Betfair SP on 20 of his 21 victories. So if you do fancy Altior, I think if you want to put it in, run and play in, I think you'll definitely get matched. If he jumps like he jumped the last day in Newbury, I can't give him any chance of beating Defi de Soy personally. He hit even money the last day to beat the horses he beaten, which he should be beating much easier than he did. Defi de Soy is 6 from 8 at Cheltenham. Jumps now, I think we can confirm that he jumps like a champion chaser. Whatever way the race is run, it will suit him. He's a turn of foot. We know he stays 2.5 miles from when he beat Lost in Translation last year. And for me, Chacun Pour Soi, it's a massive question mark whether he'll get up the hill or not with the experience that he has. He obviously doesn't have too many runs over fences as compared to Defi de Soy and Altior. I know he beat Defi de Soy a punch down with Defi de Soy. That was his 6th run of the season. So he'll meet him on fresher terms this day. So the hill is a big worry for me as he doesn't look the strongest of stayers over 2 miles. I think Defi de Soy, in my opinion, should be favoured for the race. I think Altior will go on reputation more so than what he's done this season.
Let's talk about that briefly because Ryan mentioned the in-running price of Altior that he obviously hits higher. It's all to do with that. Call it a flat spot, call it slow transmission, whatever it is, he's got away with it in the last 18 months because he's had to go and catch Sir Royal or Dynamite Dollars at the other end of that flat spot. This time he's going to have to try and probably by 5 or 6 lengths potentially go and catch Chacun Pour Soi and Defi de Soy, and that's why for me Altior is so vulnerable in this spot against these two in particular.
Couldn't agree more. I don't think there's anybody on this panel who thinks he's the pick of the trio. A couple of things that I like, just slightly outside the box. Undersoul's retirement was obviously pretty crap for connections, but it means there's an easier lead there, I think, potentially for Chacun Pour Soi. I think he could lead Bundoran if they wanted. And the other thing is just if you're getting against Altior, laying him, or you're backing the other two against him, what would be about 4 to 6 or something coupled, you've got 2 ways of attacking Altior in that sense. You've got Defi de Soy, who's the patient, the ridden horse that has a turn of foot that can produce late, or you've got Chacun Pour Soi, who's ridden more aggressively and might be away and gone by the time Altior finally opens up. But Jamie makes the key point. Not since he beat Min has he beaten a proper horse. He's beaten a lot of 155, low 160s horses in Soul Royale, etc. Politolog last year. These two are on a different level to that. I mean, they'd be representative champion chase winners if they were in it on their own, and I'd be really, really surprised. If Altior wins this, then he's a complete legend, but I think the other two have got him beaten all ends up.
Martin, is now the time to bet against Altior?
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's exactly the key point. Basically, 2 years ago, he produced an outstanding performance. He beat Min 7 lengths. The time was outstanding. His performance was outstanding. He's had problems since. He's 10 years old. and he hasn't produced that level of performance. He looked vulnerable last year. Yeah, he got the job done, but we all know that the second-rate horses that he was beating, and that's been the case for the last sort of 18 months or so, really. The one time that he came up against a top-class horse and top-class rival in Surname, he got beat, and it was nothing to do with the trip. He was beaten leaving the back straight at Ascot. We could all see that, you know, leaving the back straight at Ascot. Surname's trading at about 5 top. He had him beat. It's simple as that. I don't think he's the same horse that he was 2 years ago, and it's understandable being a 10-year-old, isn't it? He's had a lot of hard races and he's had a few issues along the way, but that makes him vulnerable to rivals that are in Defi de Soy and Chacun Poursoir that are 2 and 3 years his inferior in their pomp, essentially. They're capable of not dissimilar levels of performance as what Altior was in his prime, and they are in their prime. Altior isn't, so I think he'll get beat. I genuinely do, and to be honest with you, I'll just back the pair of them. I don't have a particularly strong view. Dan said it's 4-6. That you couple the other two. Nothing else can win really if Chacun or Defi gives her a running. 4-6 about one of those two winning is perfectly fair in my eyes, so I'll back both.
Striking thing about the Ascot race as well, you associate Nichols with being the bloke who targets the lesser races away from the festival. He's worked with Frodon and Black Court and horses like that. But the market could not have spoke any more strongly for Altior. He went from 4-6 to 3-1 on, which you just don't see moves like that. And there was just no fluke. Well, they obviously thought they had Altior spot on, and the vibes after were pretty horrendous. You had stuff like there was a physical setback, he doesn't look himself, and then what has he done to redeem his reputation? He's come back and beaten the same horses he's been beating for 2 years. So he's run on to, you want to say play slave, but you know he'll run to a sort of level that you think Martin's right. You probably just want to back the other two against him, and 4-6 it's not a disaster.
I basically agree with what the two lads have said so far. I think the other two are more interesting than Altior. Having said that, I do think Chacun Poursoir has a little bit to prove in that it's his first time at Cheltenham and he's up against two, whatever you say about Altior's suitability to the track, he's a 4-time Cheltenham Festival winner and definitely is a 2-time Cheltenham Festival winner. So for me, those two hold an advantage over him in that sense. I think coming into the season, I was probably, of the three, I would have been least keen on Defi de Soy, but I think that's switched on its head. I think at the start of the season, one of the big issues with Defi de Soy was his jumping. But he's been round 3 of the stiffest jumping tests in the country, Cheltenham, Sandown and Ascot, and barely made a mistake. He's looking more and more the complete horse with each run, and I think he might just have the edge.
Billy, do you share our pessimism over Altior? And also, do you share Ryan's suggestion that Chacun might be vulnerable at Cheltenham? It's a very valid point, and until he runs there, we don't know. The pessimism, I don't want to be dissing Altior, because Altior he's a champion, he's a fantastic horse. Until he's beaten in this grade, he's still the best 2-mile chaser around, but like everybody else says, that there will come a day, we all know he hits a flat spot in a race, there will come a day where, you know, he's going to hit a flat spot and he's going to have too much ground to make up. And I just love the dynamic of this race. I mean, you've got two really strong stayers at 2 miles in the form of Altior and Defi de Soy, and you've got a really fast horse in Chacun Poursoir. I think there's no doubt Chacun Poursoir is the fastest horse in this race. Whether he's the best, we'll find out on Wednesday. I was disappointed is too strong a word, but you know, I'd like to have seen him go a little bit farther away from Min on the run in at Leopardstown. Now I know Min is probably better at 2.5 miles these days, but he travels so well through the race, he jumps so well through the race. You'd love to have seen him just put another 2 or 3 lengths between himself and Min on the run in. He wasn't really going away from him. Now, it's going to be a real test of Paul Townend how he rides this horse, because you know, I think the instinct will be, like, he's going to see Altior probably turning into the straight. The Boinville is probably going to be pushing away. Paul Townend will be hard on the bridle, and the instinct will be to go for home, 2 out. Whether he'll get up the hill is the big question. And even if he beats Altior, you've also got Defi de Soy, who will be running on up the hill. So I don't think it's a race I'm going to have a bet in, but it's a race I absolutely can't wait to see. I think it's going to be not just the race of the week. I think this could be the best race of the year, to be honest.
but unanimous in that, you know what, this is the time to put the betting boots on and get against out your grey horse that he has been. In terms of betting, in terms of the market, you've got to be against him next Wednesday. Let's talk about Tiger Roll, because again he's going to be central to many bankers and central to many accumulators when it comes to Cheltenham. We won't spend too much time on it, but Dan, you think that this French horse is a real threat to him, don't you?
Yeah, I think he's the best horse he's run against in one of these races. And for all the Gigginstown grandstanding, there's absolutely no doubt that the Grand National was always the main aim with this horse. He happens to have taken in the cross-country 2 years in a row because it's a perfect point of the season. He needs to get qualified for Aintree, and he was even more impressive last year than the year before. You could say it was almost in Gold Cup calibre territory the way he dominated 12 months ago. But I just really like this horse, Easy's Land. He's got youth on his side. He's just turned 7, I think. JP step just 6, only 6.
Just a quick one down on him. Do you think JP's bought him to win the race this year or to win the race for the next 3 or 4 years?
I think to win it until they end the race and just name it after him. He's won every single start that he's completed over cross-country fences, and the caveat is that 3 of those were falls, and he fell 3 times in succession. And vote number 2, I was at Cheltenham that day. He's got this weird low jumping technique. He's said a lot about French horses, but he was brushing through fences that if it was a park course at Aintree or something, he'd be on his backside. But the ability must be massive. He made a sweeping move to get to the front over a race over an extreme distance, and then had enough about him to go away. And then when he was closed down slightly on the run-in by a horse that's been around here loads, that Amazing Comedy, we had him rated 140 one year, and he obliterated him and opened up again right after the last. So loads of ability. Young McManus bought him. It's a race, of course, we associate with McManus, despite Tiger Roll's dominance of late. I think thinking back to Spot the Difference, Josie's Orders, and Guard Sean Petra, for instance, being absolute monsters around there. I think he's in the same bracket potentially. And the other thing to mention about him is just the increasing strength in depth compared to the British and Irish when it comes to these cross-country races that they have in France. Every single cross-country race nowadays seems to feature a French horse finishing in the placings or in his case, dominating the field. So, yeah, the price isn't what it was. I think he's half from 6 to 3s, but it's not even going to be Tiger Roll's main aim for the springtime. I'm sure it'll be Easy's Lands, and I think he can beat Tiger Roll.
Just while we're on the French form, my friend at Sky, Laurent Barberan, he's always been all over Easy Lands, and he's convinced that he can beat Tiger Roll. And also, he brokered the deal to get a horse called Time White over to Paul Nicholls. He's running in the Fred Winter, and Paul Nicholls really fancy. One of the listeners race at Musselburgh. Is that right? It's a big team, but going in that sort of race is going to really suit him. So that's just some information. We've got the bumper on the Wednesday as well. The shortest price a horse has ever been in the bumper is 2 to 1. 2 horses have been 2 to 1, and they both won. Lieberman in 2003 for the Pipes, and Envoy Allen last year. We're going to have that sort of price here, aren't we, Ryan, Bill? But is appreciated. Does he deserve to be that sort of price?
In my opinion, no. He's obviously a really strong stayer over 2 miles. But you have to remember, a horse that I was given a chance in the race is Esky Lane. He finished behind Esky Lane in Fairyhouse. Esky Lane was beaten at 101 that day. Travelled well into the race and then just didn't get home as maybe he should have. But he won in Navan since on soft to heavy ground, which would tell you that he should be fine coming up the hill at Cheltenham. He's around a 16 to 1 chance, Esky Lane. He's trained by Gordon Elliott. He goes to the race. And he's plenty of experience as well. He's running plenty of points, and that'll stand to him on the day. I think because we might have thought maybe it was opposition was thin on the ground to appreciate it and what he done at Leopardstown, he shortened into maybe an artificially short price. I can see him drifting out on the day. So for me, I think next week we'll probably be against him. We're 13 days at the moment. He's 3.2 on the exchange, but I'd definitely be looking to back something each way against him.
I think it's interesting races generally because you're saying like 2 to 1. Only 2 have been that price and they both won. But the fact he was beaten, it sounds very simplistic. I mean, you got 2 to 1 for a champion bumper. You'd normally associate that being a horse who's come out twice or 3 times, dominated all 3 times, and goes there unbeaten. He isn't that. He was very good the other day, but Eric Bloodaxe, who brought that strong piece of form, clearly didn't fire. That form was let down. We've discussed the strength of the champion bumper 12 months ago. And there's a horse who hasn't been seen since winning at Aintree Next Time, who's still in this. I was just interested generally, because I've not double-checked prices for this. That's the Glancing Queen and Mare of Allen Kings, who's still in the field, comes from what will surely prove to be a stronger renewal than this will be. 16's not run over. She might not go for it, but we've already eulogised about how good it was last year, and she was right on the heels of them, confirmed that form when winning really well at Aintree. I've backed third time lucky for this for 25. I thought it was an interesting horse after Huntingdon, but I'm disappointed by the fact that the second and third have been beaten since, so I've given up slightly on that. And she just struck me as potentially interesting for a yard that they're not going to have any horse unfit for Cheltenham, but they're extremely good after long layoffs for Allen King's stable, and she does have that really good form last year.
Yeah, I mentioned Lieberman, the only other horse who went off 2-1 and won. He ran in the previous year's champion bumper and then they waited until the next year's champion bumper to do the business on him. But that dawn run, the Mare's Novices Hurdle, the favourite for that at the Bromheads, that was behind the Glancing Queen at Aintree, I think. Actually. Yeah. What do you think about Appreciated, Billy?
I think he's very short, but at the same time, he's the best bumper horse we've seen in Ireland, I've no doubt about that. I think people are knocking him because he won a 2.5 mile bumper at Leopardstown over Christmas. I wouldn't read anything into that. Yes, it's 2.5 miles, but they only hack around for 1.6 miles, so it's not really a test of stamina. He quickened up really well, and if you look at his win at the Dublin Racing Festival the last day in a Grade 1 bumper, again, they didn't go very fast. If you look at the closing sectionals, I think it's a 107% finishing speed or something, which suggests that the early pace was not strong, but he was absolutely, he really showed a good turn of foot that day, so I wouldn't be a bit worried about his speed. Certainly if the ground turns up soft, he's going to be very hard to beat, but he is very short. The two horses that have impressed me most in bumpers this year, outside of Appreciated, one is Panic Attack, who obviously won the Mayor's bumper for Willie Mullins and Market Raisin. I'm not sure if she's going to run. She's gone to David Pipe. We're talking about maybe sending her to Aintree, but we'll find out in the next few days. But I did think she was very impressive at Market Raisin. And the other one is another Willie Mullins horse who there was a load of chat about early on in the year. It's taken him a while to kind of get things all together, but he seemed to do it last week, and that's Fernie Hollow. Early on in the year, he seemed to be their number one bumper horse. He got beaten twice because he was just too keen. They put a hood in him at Fairyhouse the other day, and he absolutely went to sleep at the back of the field. It was desperate ground, but he still quickened up really well. It wasn't a particularly strong race, but I think he showed glimpses of the undoubted ability that he has. He's going to be a much bigger price than Appreciated. He's about 8-1 at the moment. I think he's a horse with huge potential, but I think at the way things stand, there's no doubt that Appreciated is the best in Willie Mullins' yard. I take Ryan's point about Esky Lane. He did finish in front of Appreciated first time out. He went and won at Navan. He didn't actually have to improve to win at Navan. I don't know how strong a race that was, but there's certainly loads of potential. He can improve again, but you can say that about loads of horses in this race. Pretty much every horse in this race is open to improvement. That's why Appreciated is probably too short for my liking, but if I was going to have a bet, I might have something each way on Fernie Hollow, because they go a really good gallop and it will suit them.
The only thing I'd have to add about the Wednesday would be the bumper again. And just generally looking at the mares in the last few years, there's obviously been this programme that's been put on for mares in racing generally, and it has increased their standing a little bit. More of them are kept in training rather than being sold on, and more opportunities are given to them. And we've seen more and more mares winning at the Cheltenham Festival as a result of that, including in the bumper in receipt of the weight. We've had Relegate that won it a couple of years ago, we've had Fiona that won it as well. So 2 of the last 3 renewals of the bumper have been won by mares in receipt of the weight allowance as well. And Queen's Brook for Gordon Elliott made a winning start in the middle of February. She was very impressive, she was very strong in the market as well. She was sent off extremely well backed. She looked a strong stayer. I think you have to be a strong stayer to win a champion bumper, to be honest. I think that generally speaking they do go a better gallop than in most bumpers, simply because of the field size and the experience and the competitiveness of the race. She did look a very strong stayer, and she looked like she's got stacks of abilities. So Queen's Brook, I think, is interesting for the champion bumper.
I've barely watched the bumper all season, so I'm not going to pretend like I've got a view in that race. But one other race on the Wednesday that I think there's a horse worth mentioning, the Coral Cup. Always a fiercely competitive handicap, but there's an interesting horse trained by Willie Mullins. Now, he does have one called Canardier who's joined him since that horse last ran. I think finished 5th in the race last year, and that's the one that the betting seems to have jumped on. But I think he's got another one that's arguably more interesting, and that's a horse called Saglawi, who ran in the Irish Champion Hurdle when last seen, and he was given a very patient ride, but he was just starting to creep into it when hampered at the second last and basically lost all chance with the mistake that he made by virtue of being hampered. Prior to that, he finished second at Fairy House on New Year's Eve behind Burrows Saint, who won the Irish Grand National last year. That horse slipped the field. Saglawi did best of the rest. He's basically very unexposed in handicaps. He's running one handicap in his life. That was at Fairy House in December 2018 when he finished third in a really competitive race from a mark of 144. He's got a mark of 146 in this country. I think he's unexposed over 2.5, unexposed in handicaps. He's a good flat horse. I think he's got more to offer, and he's a bit under the radar at the moment.
Anything else for the handicaps, Ryan, on the Wednesday, or Billy? Currently, I fancy about 19 in the Coral Cup, so we'll wait until the day.
So, I think that that's it for the first half. But if you remember to leave your quiz answers with the lads just beside the door, we'll get them marked and give you